Good afternoon, and welcome to the Concord Bookshop. If you've ever walked out of a negotiation with a funny feeling that you've left money on the table, or a promotion you didn't get, or that other people with the same skills are getting ahead, well then this book may be for you. Ask for It shows how, through a four-phase program, to identify your worth, maximize your bargaining power, develop a strategy, and manage reactions and emotions to leverage your own position and get what you deserve. The author, Sara Laschever, has worked as a writer and editor for almost 25 years. Her work has been published by the New York Review of Books, the New York Times, the Village Voice, Harvard Business Review, the Globe, many other publications. She's also edited books published by Harvard Business School Press, Perseus, Hyperion, and Alfred Knopf. She also worked for 3 years as a senior writer and editor at Mercer Management Consulting in Lexington, Mass. Ms. Laschever co-founded the journal Millennium Pop, a quarterly journal. Now it's a website devoted to serious commentary about popular culture. She's appeared on Boston area television discussion programs such as The Group, Greater Boston, and New England Cable Newsnight as a cultural commentator. She lives in Concord with her husband and 2 children. And so please welcome Sara Laschever.
Thanks everybody. It's so great to see some very smiling, friendly faces and some smiling people I don't know. I'm going to just describe the genesis of this project, and some of you know this story, but for those who don't, I wrote the book with an economist at Carnegie Mellon named Linda Babcock. And about 10 years ago, Linda was the director of the PhD program at the Heinz School, which is a graduate school of public policy and management at Carnegie Mellon. And some angry female graduate students came to her office and they said, how come so many of the men in this program are teaching their own courses while most of the female graduate students are serving as TAs to regular faculty? And Linda said, I don't know, doesn't sound good to me. So she went to the associate dean in charge of making teaching appointments, and fortunately he was her husband, so he was very frank with her. And he said, you know, I'll give a course to anybody who comes in with a reasonably good idea, some demonstrated teaching ability, and a modest budget. And the men ask, the women just don't ask. So Linda started to reflect on some other things that had happened when she was director of the program. A woman had complained to her because she had let a couple of men march in graduation ceremonies in June, even though they weren't defending their dissertations till August. And this woman said, I would have loved to march in graduation ceremonies, but I didn't think I could because I'm not finishing till August. And Linda said, I would love to let you. I didn't know you wanted to. They came and asked, and I said, okay. Another woman came and said, how come you gave department funds to this man to go to this public policy conference? I would love to go to that conference. And he got to go, I didn't get to go. And Linda said again, you know, I had the funds, he came. I think of my role as, you know, head of the PhD program to help students get what they need and, you know, promote their interests. And so when people come and ask me for stuff, if I can do it, I give it to them. But she realized that by not noticing that men were asking a lot more than women, that she was favoring men, that she was giving them advantages that the women didn't have. The men, when they went out on the job market, because they had teaching experience, they would be more attractive candidates. The man who went to the public policy conference, he was able to make some connections, build some alliances, you know, talk about ideas, things that might, you know, stand him in good stead later on. So Linda began to wonder if this was a problem that extended beyond the Heinz School, and she went to the negotiations research literature, and she found that almost without exception, all the research on gender differences in negotiation had looked at gender differences when people are negotiating. Nobody had really looked at what motivates people to negotiate, what constrains them from negotiating, and most to the point whether there's a difference in the frequency, the propensity to ask for things for themselves between men and women. So she's turning this over in her head and thinking, it seems like kind of a big idea here. And she was, the following year, she was a visiting professor at the Harvard Business School. And she and I met during that time, and she was talking about it. It sounded really terrific, and so we decided to write this book together. And she went off and did a big research study, looked at this question from a lot of different angles. She had graduate students go out to airports and malls with questionnaires. She had people come into her lab and play games, and she watched to see whether they used negotiation to improve their position. She did a huge web survey, and the findings were very consistent. men ask for things for themselves about 4 times as frequently as women do. So she thought, wow, okay, that's a big difference, but does it matter? Does it cost women? Maybe women just do things or get things in different ways. So she decided first to look at salary, since the salary differential between men and women continues to be significant. And she did this one calculation which kind of kicked off the, whatever I would call the mini furor about Women Don't Ask when it was published, which is that she figured out that simply by not negotiating your salary, your first salary out of college, or your first salary when you finish your training, a woman can lose between, or sacrifice between $500,000 and $1.15 million over the course of her career. Minimum, if you go into a low earning profession, that's a sacrifice of about $500,000, which is really a shocking loss for a one-time negotiation, probably 5 minutes of conversation. So, here she had done this calculation, she did all this research, I traveled all over the country, interviewed lots of people, lots of women, many different, professions, backgrounds, educational levels, dragged my children who were much smaller than with me. They got to see the world, or they got to see America. And so then we wrote this book, which was our first book, which is called Women Don't Ask. And this book, as I said, created a little bit of a sensation. It seemed to be an idea that, as one of the people who gave us a blurb, Teresa Carey, said, it seemed to be an idea that had been hiding in plain sight, something very obvious that a lot of people could say, yeah, that's probably true, but nobody had actually done the research and demonstrated that it was more than a hunch, that it was really a social fact. So we got a lot of attention, and we have subsequently been invited to give a lot of talks about the book. Colleges, universities, women's leadership programs, corporations that are committed to diversity. And after each talk, people come up to us and they say, I know I have this problem, tell me what to do. Or, I can't bear the thought of how much I've left on the table already, can you give us some tips? And so that's why we wrote this book. This book is much more of the how-to advice book, about what you can do to change this, even though, I always like to say, I don't really think this is a woman's problem. It's not something about women that's kind of broken and needs to be fixed. I think it is really a socially constructed problem that we create in the ways we teach our children about what we expect of them as men and women, the kinds of behavior we accept and tolerate in women as adults, and, other factors, schooling, the media, things kids pick up through, books and movies, TV. And so I think it is a problem that we all can address in different ways in our lives. I really think there's potential for organizations to address it, organizations that are committed to diversity in their ranks and to making it possible for women to rise into leadership positions. But until that happens, there are some things that women can do themselves. So that's what Ask For It is about. And I'm going to read a little bit from it. Excuse me. Anyway, I guess somebody came in just reminded me that I've traveled all over the country. I've talked to lots and lots of women about this, and with very few exceptions, women say, me too. Very, very senior women, you think would be, must have negotiated a lot to get where they are, and they'll say, oh, I'm great at negotiating for my customers. I'm great at negotiating for the company. I never ask for anything for myself. The one place where several women have come up to me and said, I don't have that problem. I ask for whatever I want is Concord, Massachusetts. And I'm a tough Concord mom. I don't have that problem. And that may be true. There is a phenomenon called the denial of personal disadvantage, which has been very well studied, in which members of a minority group all agree that, other members of their group have been discriminated against or suffered, problems that are recognizable, but they don't think it's happened to them themselves. And studies show that, alas, they are mistaken. Anyhow, the book is designed as a 4-phase program, as Bert said, and it shows you how to prepare for your negotiation, what kind of research you need to do about your own position, about the company or the context in which you'll be making your pitch, how to strengthen your bargaining power, the benefits of role-playing in advance, particularly if you're someone who worries about getting emotional during a negotiation, or you worry that the other person has a hot temper. Role-playing can be really useful. And we answer a lot of practical questions, like, is it better to negotiate in person, over the phone, by email? Should you make the first offer? When's the best time to ask? Does location matter? Does it matter where you ask? Should you bluff? That's always a big question. And we have something in the book we call the Negotiation Gym, which is a 6-week program that we recommend that people go through with a workout buddy, and just, develop your skills, practice a lot. Begin by, asking for lots of little things in your life, things that you don't care that much about, things where the stakes are low, but just to get in the practice of asking for things you might not have asked for before. There's a story that we tell in this book that a friend of Linda's told us. It's a woman who was a friend of hers who's very, very successful. And when Women Don't Ask came out, she said to Linda, I think it's great that you've done this. I'm sure you'll help a lot of women, but I don't have this problem. I ask for whatever I want. And then she and her business partner, who was a man, went out to San Francisco for a business meeting, and they stayed in this very fancy hotel that had just opened. It was a 5-star hotel, been written up, the architecture, the food, whatever. And the next morning, she was having breakfast with her business partner, and he said, don't you think this place is great? The bathroom is bigger than my apartment in New York. The food is so terrific, the views. And she was like, yeah, I think it's really nice, but I was kind of surprised they didn't have one of those really soft, cushy robes in the closet like a lot of luxury hotels have. And he said, oh, they have robes. I just called down and they brought one up to me. And she said it would never have occurred to her that she could just pick up the phone and ask for it if it wasn't there. A couple months later, she has a kind of a rogue theme in her life. This woman was on vacation with her family. She had her kids with her, and they were at a Ritz-Carlton resort. And they did have robes in the closets for the adults, but they didn't have any robes for the kids. And her kids were, why can't we have robes? We want robes too. And she said, the robes are just for adults. And no. Her kids wouldn't let it alone. So she thought, all right, I'll let the front desk tell them. So she told her daughter to call the front desk and ask for a robe. 5 minutes later, 3 robes for the kids were delivered to her room. So these are just examples of little things you can try asking for. Linda Babcock, she's negotiated for suits at Saks. She gets herself into a nicer hotel room, every hotel she checks into, but lots of little things. Just another example, when Women Don't Ask first came out and I was going to go on a book tour, I went to a boutique in Cambridge that I like a lot, and I bought a bunch of clothes. And so I thought, I'm spending kind of a lot of money, and I said, would you give me a volume discount because I'm spending so much money? Not the sort of thing you typically ask for or get in a boutique. And they said, well, no, we can't do that, but why don't you have this $25 item for free? Which I wouldn't have gotten if I hadn't asked. So you begin by asking for a bunch of little things that, you don't think you'll get, or you might, but you don't care, whatever. And then you ask for some things where you think, I think the reasonable amount I can get if I do negotiate is X. So then that week, second week, you ask for 2X. You ask for twice as much as you think you can reasonably ask for. Then you had a few serious negotiations you really plan, but nothing that's, high stakes, make or break your life. Things that you care about, but, you go through the steps, you research and plan, and then, week 5, you ask for some things you think it's not okay to ask for. Because women do have a lot of trouble with, what am I entitled to? Is it okay? Am I being greedy? Am I being, pushy? Shouldn't I be grateful to have what I have? So a week asking for things you think it's not okay to ask, and then a week asking for things you're pretty sure you're not going to get. Linda went and tried to negotiate the price of gas at a gas station. And the point of doing this is to basically court rejection, to get used to hearing no, because women tend to have a lot more trouble with no than men. Men are a little bit more likely, I asked, he said no, end of story, it's just business. Women are so afraid of rejection that they might not ask at all. So that's what the negotiation gym is designed to do, to help women go through practice a lot. So by week 6, they think of negotiation as kind of this ready sort of tool they can pick up and kind of make things a little better, get things they want a little more, make things a little more convenient. And also they practice enough that they really have more skills. So that's the kind of overall shape of the book. Now I'm going to read a little bit from it. Let's see if I think I do need my glasses. Okay. For many people, the word negotiation summons up images of something formal and structured. World leaders trying to end a regional conflict, corporate boards agreeing to the details of a severance package with a departing CEO, someone in a procurement office working out the terms of a contract with a supplier. They may also think of hardball tactics, feigning anger to intimidate the other side, snapping a briefcase shut and walking out, Many of them see negotiation as a form of combat, a competitive, often hostile interaction in which each side tries to beat the other or wear them down by haggling. In movies and on television, ruthless characters shake their fists and threaten their rivals. On the evening news, labor leaders and management representatives deliver ultimatums. No wonder so many women avoid negotiating. Everything about it seems unpleasant, and we're smart enough to know that it would be nuts to behave in this way with someone we know, especially someone with whom we have an ongoing relationship. Fortunately, negotiation rarely takes place in such formal circumstances. It's least effective when conducted as a battle or a contest, and in most cases, out-and-out conflict can be avoided. Negotiation is not the exclusive territory of labor leaders and diplomats, and it's not an advanced business skill used only in executive boardrooms. The ability to negotiate well is not an inborn gift or a rare and special talent. Put simply, negotiation is a tool to help change the status quo when change requires the agreement of another person. The little negotiations involve the same processes as the big ones, and in all cases, employing hardball tactics is usually the worst way to get good results. The most successful negotiators, the ones who reach agreements that benefit both sides, don't bully each other or raise their voices. They ask a lot of questions, listen carefully, share information, and try to understand both points of view. They enjoy the challenge of finding ways to satisfy everyone's interests and try to tease out the solutions that leave no one feeling aggrieved, misused, or unhappy. Seen this way, negotiation is probably something you already do every day. If you have kids, you're an old hand. Talking, discussing, deciding, working things out, these are all parts of negotiation, and they're all skills that many women already possess. Okay, so let's go forward. Now I want to talk about something that seems particularly germane in this election season, and people ask about a lot, and that is the question, the issue of the manner, the style in which a woman can ask for what she wants. Say, for example, votes. And what studies have shown, I'm going to read about this a little bit, is that in order to be persuasive or to be influential, women need to be perceived as likable. They need to be perceived as sociable and friendly. So I'm going to read about that. I'm going to start with a story from someone I interviewed that we've included in the book. Alexandra was a design consultant for a retail chain that served customers who were remodeling their kitchens and baths. Although she was one of the most popular designers at the store with a constant stream of referrals, after 7 years she wanted a change. Her store attracted clients with traditional tastes, and she wanted a job that would allow her to be a little more creative. She applied for a job at another firm that catered to a more bohemian, artsy clientele, and after several rounds of interviews, she was offered the job. When she first applied, the position description had said the salary range was between $42,000 and $60,000. The company offered her $50,000, which was only $2,000 more than she was currently making. She thought that her credentials and experience merited a salary closer to the top of the range. She also had great interpersonal skills, which made her especially adept at working with clients. So when Alexandra met with her future boss to discuss her salary, she decided to present her request for more money in a direct and forceful way. She's like, I understand that the salary for the position could be as high as $60,000, she said. My popularity with my clients, my clearly demonstrated skills, and my years of experience qualify me to earn that top figure, $60,000. I'm sure that I'm worth it. Alexandra explained to us later that she wanted to communicate how confident she was about the value she was bringing to the firm. To her surprise, her future boss reacted badly to this change in Alexandra's manner. It's another quote. He actually pushed his chair back from his desk as though he was pulling away from me, she said. I swear I saw it flash through his eyes that maybe he'd made a mistake about me. In a very cold voice, he said, when we offered you this job, we thought you would fit in well with our team-oriented style. We work in a very collaborative way here. He refused to budge on his original offer of $50,000. Alexandra was confused by his response. She didn't see how asking for more money meant that she was not going to work collaboratively. She said, there's no link, she later told us. Other designers who work there make more, and they're still team-oriented. Research about women and likability suggests that the link in her boss's mind was probably not between her ability to work collaboratively and how much she was paid, but between her ability to work collaboratively and the way in which she asked to be paid more. In presenting her request forcefully, Alexandra had stepped outside the bounds of expected behavior for women. Her boss couldn't reconcile this behavior with the impression he'd formed of her during the interview process as a pleasant, sociable woman who could work well with anyone. Suddenly, she seemed like a different sort of person altogether. So what does this mean at a practical level? Should you wear an Angora sweater, flutter your eyelashes, and act demure and admiring? Should you make sure every hair is in place, cross your ankles, speak in a quiet, ladylike voice, and offer to get coffee? No, no, and absolutely no. Instead, you need to behave in a way that Mary Sue Coleman, president of the University of Michigan, calls relentlessly pleasant. This involves choosing your words carefully, using a non-threatening tone of voice, and making sure your nonverbal behavior communicates what a nice, friendly person you are. Pleasant. So, let's see. Despite all the gains we've made, one double standard at least persists. In our society, we expect women to be nice. So what's the solution? Make an extra effort to appear likable during your negotiation. This doesn't mean that you should change the substance of what you're asking for or soft pedal your ambitions and goals. You can still be relentless in going after what you want. What we're talking about here is personal style. By setting the right tone for your negotiation, you can protect yourself from being turned down, even when what you're asking for is reasonable, because the other negotiator thinks you're coming on too strong. The language you use to frame your request and the tone you set for the interaction can strongly influence the ability of the other negotiators to hear what you're actually saying. And so we have a lot of suggestions, nonverbal behavior, the kinds of framing language you can use. Go into a lot of detail about how women can manage the impressions of the other people in the room while they're negotiating so they can get more of what they want. I'm just going to tell you the end of Alexandra's story to illustrate how this can work out. When her first attempt to negotiate her salary met with such strong resistance, Alexandra didn't give up. She thought about the situation overnight and tried again. The second time around, she presented her salary proposal the way she did most other things, in her naturally friendly, easygoing way. She said to her future boss, "I'm looking forward to working with all of you. I love the company and everyone here does such great work. And I don't want to put you on the spot, but earning this higher salary would mean a lot to me. So I'd appreciate your reconsidering my request. You said you can't pay me $60,000. That was her initial request. Is there anything I can do, anything the company needs, that it would make it possible for you to come a little closer to $60,000? Could we meet halfway?" The head of the design firm acted a little flustered, hemmed and hawed, and said he could probably give her $52,000. "Wow, thanks so much," she replied. "I really appreciate your being open to this discussion. If there were any way you could pay me $56,000, it would be such a great vote of confidence." The head of the firm said he wasn't sure he had that much in his budget for her position. "Would you mind thinking about it overnight?" Alexandra said. I don't need an answer this minute. I could start sooner if that would help." He agreed to think about it, and the next day called and said they could raise their offer to $54,000, but that was the highest they could go. Alexandra thanked him and decided to accept the job. Although she'd fallen short of her target, she persuaded him to raise his offer by $4,000. She did really like the firm, and his flexibility around the salary issue reassured her that she could work with him. She suspected, and we do too, that she might have done better if she hadn't started out by violating her future boss's expectations for how she and every woman should behave. He might have been more receptive to her proposal the first time around, and he might have given her more. Still, she salvaged the situation by rethinking her approach. And then I'm just going to read a bit from the conclusion, and the conclusion we call, "If you never hear no, you're not asking enough." And the point we make that, in the negotiation, Jim, is you have to go out and get used to hearing no, get comfortable hearing no, and then you will in fact do better overall. And let me just read you a little bit from the conclusion, and then we'll be done. Hannah, a violinist, was offered a teaching job at a conservatory for $40,000 a year. Hannah asked for $42,000 and got it, making her wonder if she could have gotten more if she'd asked. The answer is probably. Because she didn't aim high and didn't risk having her first request turned down, she'll never know what her boss was really willing to pay her and how much she left on the table. We've heard dozens of stories like this from women we've met. I finally asked for a raise and my boss said, okay, right away. Now I feel stupid for not asking for more. I thought I was aiming really high and I never thought he'd give me what I asked for. When he said yes immediately, I realized I'd aimed too low again. Another one, I'd never gotten a bonus before, but I'd put in a killer year. My sales figures were monstrous, so I marched in and asked for one. I thought I was being pretty nervy, but my boss didn't even look up from his desk. Okay, he said, I should have asked for twice as much. Researchers call this phenomenon the winner's curse. We call it the downside of yes. If the other side can easily give you what you want, in most cases, they could have given you more. Always getting what you ask for in a negotiation, always hearing yes and never risking no means that you never ask for enough. Excessive caution, rather than protecting you from rejection or losing face, can actually prevent you from getting all that you're worth, all you deserve, and all that's available. Pushing the boundaries pays off in other ways as well. When you aim high in a negotiation, you adjust other people's perceptions of you. Remember, most people assume that more expensive things are superior to less expensive things. You communicate that you expect to be treated fairly and that you're willing to stand up for yourself in a friendly and likable way, of course. Now and then one of your requests may elicit a no that stings, but you may discover that this too is not necessarily so bad. Sometimes a no means a relationship won't survive, not because the other party is offended, but because you discover that you no longer want to continue under the status quo. Achieving this kind of clarity can be painful, but worth it. Boys learn in Little League, and now more and more girls are learning this too, that if they never get tagged out stealing a base, they're not trying to steal enough bases. In other words, they'll gain more ground, score more runs, and win more games if they take chances, if they try to steal bases even when they're not absolutely sure they can make it. They also refine their ability to gauge when to take those risks. They get better at stealing bases. They improve their skills and get used to failing sometimes, and they learn to celebrate those failures as risks well taken. The same lesson can be applied to negotiating. By asking a lot and setting high targets, you'll gain more than if you hold back out of fear that you might be turned down. Yes, you'll get thrown out at second base sometimes, but you'll still do better than if you never ask or you always ask for less. You'll also learn what can and can't be negotiated. Taking greater risks helps you map out what is possible, negotiable, and flexible, and what is not. Like the Little Leaguer, you'll learn what works and what doesn't, when to run and when to hold. You'll gain valuable experience and get better at negotiating. You'll also form new habits and new ways of thinking, and soon negotiating will become a reflex rather than an effort. The day-to-day negotiations, for a table by the window instead of one by the kitchen door, for a better cut of meat than the first one the butcher grabs, for half an hour to run an errand in the middle of the workday, for your partner to take the kids to an amusement park on a summer weekend when you need a break, will become second nature. You'll know you can ask for both the big and the little changes, and you'll feel calm, confident, and comfortable in your skin while doing so. Life will open its doors a little more easily to you, and it's worth hearing no now and then for that, isn't it?
Does anyone have any questions for our author?
It's interesting. I just had an experience with my oldest daughter where she was afraid to ask for something, and I realized that it was something she was going to have to begin doing. And as you started to read, I realized I have 3 daughters that, do you have any thoughts with all of your work you've done about how you start this earlier rather than when they hit the workforce?
I do think it's important to start as early as possible. God bless you. One of the things that Linda Babcock has done, I don't know if it's sort of ready, but I think it actually is that she's worked with the Girl Scouts Council out where she's in Pittsburgh at Carnegie Mellon to develop a negotiation badge. So 8 to 12-year-old girls in the Girl Scouts are, a sequence of things they have to do to get this badge, to learn how to negotiate, practice negotiating, and figure out how to do it better, and they get the badge. She's also developed a a video game, a computer game, where you know, boys and girls can do this. You get on, in order to improve your position and get to the next level, you have to figure out what to trade and how to, you know, figure out what to do to negotiate to get higher. So I think there are, you know, there's some things out there. I think you need to talk to your daughters, and it's also important for everybody to talk to their sons too about it's okay when girls ask for things. It's good, you know, the more we know about what people want, the better everything functions. And so, you know, it is also that the environment can be a little hostile when girls start asking for things. So I do think that there's a long way to go, and that you know, parents have a huge part to play there.
And I remember grabbing Getting to Yes by Fisher and I think Yuri or
Yep,
whatever his
that's
name is.
right.
And I just wondered, you know, how does what you're doing here relate to other earlier work on negotiation like theirs? And
It completely builds on it. If anyone is interested in negotiating and you have not read Getting to Yes, it is a classic text. It's incredibly useful. And what it addresses and what it lays out is something called cooperative bargaining, which is the opposite of that competitive, I win, you lose, if I get more, you get less kind of negotiation that many people think is negotiation. It talks about the ways in which you can share information, elicit information from the other side, and really figure out what the core interests are behind the positions people are staking out. And thereby be a little bit more creative about fitting the pieces together. If you find out more about what they want, you might find out actually something that's really important to you isn't quite as important to them, but there's something else that would be easy for you to give that they care about a lot. And so this builds on that completely, and we do have a chapter in here about cooperative bargaining that introduces those strategies, which are terrific, and they're particularly terrific for women, because women mostly feel a little more comfortable with that style of negotiating and tend to be very good at it. I would say, it sounds like there are two questions there. One is there always somebody to ask, and unfortunately I think our social services are deficient in certain areas, and you know, as a government, as a, you know, as a state, as a country, we don't take care of people who don't fit into narrow categories. And I think that is challenging. The other thing is we do talk quite a bit in the book about negotiating outside the workplace. This is really not just about negotiating at work. There's more data about that, but there's, you know, lots of other material about negotiating with, you know, people working on your house, people, you know, vendors, people, stores, and also family members. So
I just thought it might be a
hopefully
good
that
chapter in your book of how to do it wrong and how a simple thing can get so blown up the wrong way, and then how it takes so long to undo it. Thank you.
Yes.
Do you recommend any different approach with, say, a nonprofit?
Well, again, the important thing is to do your research up front and figure out. A lot of nonprofits will say, there are ranks, you're at this level, you know, you can't get any more if you're working at this level. And so what you need to do is some research and find out, is that true? Is it possible to skip levels? If so, what do you need to do? What kind of qualifications do you need to have to, you know, up that rank? Or is it possible to negotiate so, you know, you can push that upper limit? Sometimes, unfortunately, I think nonprofits can be a little bit more rigid than other areas, and sometimes the only thing you can do is get another job. Sometimes, really, you do have to go somewhere else to get recognized for what you've been doing. But short of that, you know, you want to figure that out before you jump. That may not be true. Well, I could tell you lots of stories. There's lots of really cool data about this. There's data that shows that parents are much more comfortable when their children play with gender appropriate toys. So we give little girls baby dolls and kitchen sets, and we give which are about taking care of other people, not about what do I want to get. They're about, you know, focusing on the needs of others. There's something I recently saw. I got one of these high-end kids furnishings catalogs, and it had in it, they also have some like fancy wooden toys. It had for $40 a wooden ironing board, a toy ironing board, and for another $20 you could get the toy iron. And I really thought, I mean, are there a lot of little girls out there watching their moms iron and thinking, that looks like fun? Can you imagine ever giving a toy ironing board to a little boy? So we give kids, you know, we give boys train sets and construction toys that are about self-expression, setting a goal. I want to build this building or make the train go under the tunnel and up over the bridge. And also toys that are about having impact on the environment outside the house. So that's one element. Another element is that we typically give girls chores that are about taking care of other people, taking care of younger siblings, helping mom take care of the house. Typically give boys chores that are more self-directed, more independent, and involve going outside the house. Go shovel the snow, go rake the leaves. Not only are these, chores in which the boy has to decide, okay, how am I going to get this done, and get the tools, whatever that he needs to do it. But this is really significant. Boys are much more frequently paid for their chores than girls are. So dad will say, I'll give you $5 if you'll shovel the walk, or if you can, wash the car this weekend, I'll give you $10. So boys learn that they work for money. Girls learn that they work for love. Doesn't pay as well. So there's a lot of stuff in both books about that. In terms of what you can do personally, I like to think of that I'm kind of a translator between sort of the culture and my kids. So just to give an example everybody here should recognize, when my kids were small, I read them Make Way for Ducklings, Make Way for Ducklings, famous classic. And in this lovely book, what happens is Mr. and Mrs. Mallard are looking for a place to have a family. They find an island in the Charles River, lay the eggs, sit on the eggs hatch, and what happens? Dad decides to go on vacation. He's like, I'm going to go off for a week and explore the river, and I'll meet you in the public garden in a week. So I'm reading this to my children. I'm like, well, that's a weird thing to do. Daddy would never do that. And that's a fairly simple example. But I, as they've gotten older, I try to, interpret things. Just one other example: the Toy Story movies. Most parents really like the Toy Story movies. They're very imaginative. They're not particularly violent. They don't involve the death of a parent at the beginning like so many kids' movies. But if you think about the Toy Story movies, in both of them, the main plot is that one of the toys in this community of toys gets stranded outside the house in which they all live. And in both stories, it is the male toys that go out to try and save the stranded toy, while the female toys, Little Bo Peep, Mrs. Potato Head, they stay home, pack the bags, and wait faithfully. It is not their kind of concept of their characters is that they participate in this goal and then take the steps, make the choices needed to achieve it. So there are a lot of things like that. I know your daughter's a little bit older, and I'm just kind of growing up at the same age, but I think we really do need to try to kind of annotate and interpret the culture as it's coming through. Something we do recommend, especially when the economy gets kind of shaky, is that when you go into a negotiation, just don't go in planning to ask for one thing. Think, well, if they can't give me as much money as I want, what else would make me feel like they recognize my contribution and appreciate it? Maybe you want, another week of vacation, or maybe you want a better title with somewhat more money rather than, if you can't get a lot more money. Maybe you want, some matching contribution to your 401k or a nicer office. But the number one reason people leave their jobs is actually that they don't feel recognized and rewarded for their work. It's not that they want more money.
And training also, so that
training. There are lots of things. Those are just a few. There are lots of other things you might ask for if you don't get all of sort of the main thing you want. The other thing is that women, more than men, studies show, do tend to value other kinds of, have a different reward system or a different set of metrics in which they, evaluate what it is they're doing. And women value making a contribution to their community, doing social good a little bit more than men do, especially as they get older. So that can be a reason to choose working at a not-for-profit organization. But the thing that a lot of women make is they think, well, if I'm going to do this, I have to give up all of this, and you might not have to give up quite so much. Well, it's very important to keep a record of what you've done. If your organization doesn't do that, doesn't have a really, classic, transparent, detailed evaluation system, or the, whatever it is the system you're working with isn't tracking things, you need to track for yourself so that there is a record of what you've done. And then you need, as a woman, this is something else women don't feel that comfortable asking for, is recognition for their work. A woman I interviewed for the first book was this very brilliant electrical engineer. She'd gotten her PhD from MIT and started working at this startup company that designed thinking robots. And she was the lead designer on some vision software that put this company on the map, and they had this huge public offering, made millions of dollars. It was a very important product. And then her boss left, and a guy came on who didn't know her, and at the time she was pregnant with her third child. And she said that her feeling was he took one look at her and all he saw was a big fat cow. And he made her feel like she wasn't important to the company. There was no record in her personnel file or in the materials he got from the company of exactly what her contribution had been. And so she didn't feel like saying, hey, that's mine, I did that, and she just left after 6 months. So they lost this employee who had basically put them on the map, who had created this product that was, terrific, and, right about the time she was having her third baby, she went and had to go and start a new job. So it is important to find a way to feel comfortable asking for credit for what you've done in a way that doesn't feel too pushy and boastful. So I think maybe we should stop now. I've got some books here I'd be happy to sign. I'd be happy to talk to people informally if you want to come up after. Thank you so much for coming.